Hi Year 9, welcome to our second lesson on protest. To start with today, I want us to think about voting. And I want us to think about, should school be 2 hours longer and finish at 5? So you wouldn't get to come in later or anything, we'd still start at the same time, but we'd all go home, teachers and pupils, at 5 o'clock instead, all learning until 5 o'clock. So I want you to think about how you would vote. But before you do that, if you own a dog, if you have brown hair, if you have blonde hair or you're female, you are not allowed to vote, so your vote won't count at all. So it doesn't matter what you think because your vote won't count. So how does that make you feel? I imagine a lot of you felt frustrated, a lot of you felt angry, felt that it was very, very unfair. Why should you not have a say? I bet you felt upset, okay? And that's perfectly acceptable, because why should you not have a voice? Why should you not be allowed to vote just because you've got blonde hair? So this is what the situation was in 1831, or very similar. So we're going to be looking at Chartism today, which I'll explain a little bit more about later on. But the situation with voting and voting for your MP, voting for your Member of Parliament in 1831 was like this. No man under 21 can vote. Only men who own property worth 40 shillings a year, of which there wasn't many, can vote. Now, that means that people who are poorer, who don't own their own properties, who rent and perhaps work on the fields, work in the factories, they won't have a vote, which is the majority of the country. Okay, the majority of the country can't vote. I emphasize the word men as well. Women didn't actually get the vote till 1918, so we're nearly 100 years away from women getting the vote. Not quite 100 years, but we're from women actually getting the vote yet. So women aren't even considered. They're not considered at all. Voting is not a secret, it's completely announced, so that opens up opportunities for blackmail, for bribery. You have to stand and say, I vote for such and such, which means that people can hear what you're voting for. So people are threatened by people. People are paid, like I said, bribery. People are paid off to vote for the person that is actually standing. And MPs also weren't paid. Now this was a problem because obviously the working man needed money to live, and being an MP was a full-time job. So only if you already had money could you plausibly stand for Member of Parliament. So this means that the MPs that were running the country are all aristocratic. They're all the upper classes with lots and lots of money. There's not really a diversity of people in the Houses of Parliament. So they're all run by the rich, okay? In some places, the landowner picked who he wanted, and these were called rotten boroughs. We'll learn a little bit more about that in a sec. Many of these rotten boroughs could have 2 MPs. Big cities like Manchester had none. So this is a mick take. Obviously, it's an advert, it's a cartoon, but it's not very far from the truth. To be sold, the estate of Rottendown, 2 cottages, rather dilapidated, a paddock and a pigsty, lowest price 25,000, returned 2 members of Parliament. So there were actually areas where there was about 30 people living, and again, I'll let you find out a little bit more about this in a sec. Little areas, little hamlets with sort of five houses, maybe 6 houses. You had 2 MPs, and you had big cities like Manchester with no MPs at all. They weren't represented in Parliament at all. So the Great Reform Act then came in 1832 to try and rectify some of this. Now, I'm not going to tell you too much about it because there are information sheets attached to this lesson. Okay, they're underneath the video on Moodle. And what I want you to do is use that information sheet to fill in this table. So we've got pocket boroughs, rotten boroughs, members of Parliament or MPs, and the voting system. I want you to describe it. I want you to tell me why it was an issue. How did the Great Reform Act change it, and how successful was the Great Reform Act? Okay, so I'm going to suggest that you pause the video and get that done now. So hopefully you've done that, you found the information sheet. So let's have another little look at the Great Reform Act. So the number of voters increased to about 800,000. Still not many when you think about the amount of people that actually live in the country. It gave some new industrial towns like Manchester MPs for the first time, and it did get rid of some of the old rotten boroughs. But still, only 1 in 5 men could vote, and voting is still not a secret. So there's still lots and lots of problems with the voting system at this time. The majority of people in the country haven't got a vote. So what I want you to do now is, I can't actually show you this, but I want you to go to this YouTube video, this link, and I want you to write down any important notes. Think about what Chartism was, how it's been described, and why it was important, okay? So any bullet points that you can from this video. So I'm going to suggest that you pause this video, go to this link, and do that now. So hopefully you've done that now. So the Chartists came up with the People's Charter. This is what they wanted. They had 6 demands. Okay, they wanted a vote for every man, not woman, I might add, over 21. A secret ballot where you could go and you could vote in secret and nobody would know what you voted for. They wanted MPs to be paid, which would open it up to more people. Equal constituencies. They wanted every area to be the same size, have the same population. So every MP represented exactly the same amount of people. They wanted an election once a year, and they wanted to get rid of property laws for MPs. They wanted to get rid of the law that said that MPs had to own a certain amount of property to be an MP. Okay. All of these came into fruition in the end, by bar one. It took a long time, but today all of these exist apart from one. I wonder if you can guess the one. So it's actually the parliamentary election once a year. It's got to be 4 years minimum that we have an election. Okay. So what I want you to do to end now is design your own charter. Design your own 6-point school charter. What would you like to demand from schools? 6 points of yourself. So again, suggest that you pause the video and do that now. So were they right? Do you think the Chartists were right to want change? Explain your answer using all you've learned today. Okay. Write it in a paragraph, write it in bullet points, do it in a table. It's totally up to you. Just put it down on paper. How do you think they were right and why? Explain your answer. And once you've done that, we finish. Thank you very much.